Instead of actually acknowledging Keir Starmer's achievement in this general election and since he took over the Labour leadership just 4 years ago, the media are actually focused on undermining the validity of Keir Starmer's achievements. We have a first past the post system. Keir Starmer has played that system and won an enormous majority. Now we have the media wanting to focus on vote share. We don't have a system which looks at vote share at the moment. We don't have proportional representation. There are many arguments for that, and I'm a big supporter of that. But challenging the result of this latest election on that basis is actually undermining democracy. Of course, this is being led by the Reform Party, who saw that they didn't win more seats.
Just on the question of PR, how can it be right that a Conservative Party that has just over 50% more votes than we have 30 times the number of MPs? How can it be right that the now ruling Labour Party, they've got just over double the number of votes that we have, and they've got some 100 times the number of MPs? This is a flawed democratic system, and I think that people will be looking at these results and saying this is not a real, genuine, fair democracy. And I think that the people will absolutely demand real change. We quite like referendum. We've got quite a good track record. And I'm absolutely convinced if there was a referendum this weekend on PR, we'd win it hands down. No ifs, no buts.
A bit rich coming from the Reform Party, who were the Brexit Party, who were UKIP, because they have been the ones who have been so outraged by the suggestion of another vote after the 2016 referendum. We had a referendum on changing first past the post, actually, and that was just over 10 years ago. So if you apply the same principle that they say we have to live with Brexit because we had a once in a generation vote, and you're not allowed to vote on it again for 40 years, it's a bit rich that they're asking, as soon as we've had an election in which they lost, that they now are demanding a referendum on proportional representation. It's understandable why they want to campaign for proportional representation.
You start with this thumping majority, which is, you would say, is your mandate for change. But let's remember, 2/3 of the voters that did not choose you. Does that really give you the authority to impose what the minority that backed you want on the majority? And let me just make it very specific. The MPs that support your government got less than 24,000 votes for each seat. Yet it took 500,000 votes to elect a Green MP, over 800,000 to elect a Reform MP. Is that really a fair system?
Well, first of all, Labour has a clear mandate. The first political party in a generation...
You've got a lot of MPs. You've got 2/3 of the MPs elected with 1/3 of the votes.
The first political party in a generation to win a majority of seats in England, Wales and Scotland. That is no small achievement. Our system is about seats. I've been here after elections where we can say, oh, we piled up votes in a small number of places. That's not how British general elections work. I think it's really important to say that, there are results in the past that are similar to this. I don't think you can say a system is unfair just because one side wins it. And this was our strategy.
The fact that it was unfair in the past doesn't make it any better that it's unfair now.
But let's just be clear, Labour has a mandate to govern. There can be no questions around that. I would also say, when it comes to parties like Reform and the Green Party, they do get far less scrutiny because they're not seen as parties of government or going to elect significant numbers. Now, maybe that should change. I think that's something to address. I met a lot of good people in this campaign who told me they were voting Reform. When you explain to them they support in Reform the economic policies of Liz Truss and the foreign policies of Vladimir Putin, they're horrified. So, now they're in Parliament, they'll get the level of scrutiny they deserve.
Yeah, but look, I'm not being partisan. I don't want to be partisan here. This is an issue about democracy. Let me show you this chart. And I think most fair-minded people would ask themselves, is this really right? You got 33.7% of the votes, not far off what you got last time, less than you got under Corbyn when you got spanked, but you got 2/3 nearly of the seats. The Lib Dems down there, they are more or less okay. But Reform and the Greens, not less than 1% of the seats, but Reform, 1 in 7 votes. Greens, 7%. I'm just asking you really, as a Democrat, rather than as a government minister, is that really sustainable?
Look, I have talked in the past about my own views on this sort of thing, but I would say when you've got a system, you run your campaign to win under that system. Now, you can't then look at it through a different lens. You know, we have had elections in the past where Labour has had these extraordinary majorities in a small number of places. That's not good enough. We are not a party of protest, or you can't look at vote share, especially when people vote tactically. That's part of the system under first past the post. We had to get a mandate to govern to replace this former failing Conservative government. We've done that, and I think you've got to recognise that the campaign will reflect the system required to get that mandate to win.
However, it doesn't mean that Keir Starmer's government's legitimacy should be challenged or questioned, because we need the country to get behind and support this government. And one only has to reflect back on what happened with referendum. It was an advisory vote. It didn't decide anything. And yet, as soon as that result came in, the media were emphatic it had to happen, despite the fact there was only a wafer-thin majority, despite the fact that actually the people that voted to leave only came from about 27% of the population, 37% of the electorate. The media didn't explore any of this.
That fantastic speech talking about we will serve you. And that is the right way round. We've had these entitled, arrogant people serving themselves for too long. The other thing is the preparedness that's gone into his appointments. I think we've all gone, wow, Timpson, very imaginative, very positive, very clever. We've got a new Attorney General. I'm not a lawyer, but lawyers and barristers and people who are top of their game are going, that is an amazing appointment. We have an education secretary who was on free school meals. These things are important. We have Angela Rayner in there who lived in social housing. We have a better representation of the British people now. People who have...
Did you notice that when you said lived in social housing, neither of us intervened to talk about how many different social houses she
Yes, I was about to ask.
Potentially and possibly living in at the same time.
Do you know what? Also, the amount of snobbery towards that woman. There was that pathetic tweet from some GB news person talking about the suit that she was wearing. So it's like, yeah, that's called social mobility. This is what we should be aspiring to, that people who've had a tough upbringing can make it to be deputy leader of this country, and I don't care what she's wearing.
I agree with Jemma Forte. It's great to have a government in charge again who appears to be totally competent and on top of the job. Let's hope that they manage to deliver the real change that we all need. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and comment below. And here's Daisy.
Daisy, come on. Hello, little calf. Hello, Daisy. Good girl. You're a clever girl, aren't you? Yeah. That's a very sweet little calf, Daisy. Very clever.